Hey everybody, Josh Sheridan here with the Barely Legal Podcast. On today's show, we have former Major League pitcher John Kilichowski. He also happens to be, is he my best looking nephew? I'm going to say he's my best looking nephew, but I'm gonna reserve ruling on that so I don't piss off my sisters and brothers-in-law. But he was nice enough to come by today and talk with me about growing up in the Tampa Bay area, his time pitching at Jesuit, pitching at Vanderbilt in the College World Series, and then pitching for the Cardinals organization. He now is in a whole new chapter of his life, preparing to work in. He'll explain it to me because he's told me 10 times, and I'm still not sure I understand exactly what he's looking to do. But welcome to the show, John. How are you doing?
Good. Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
So you took time away from your studies on this rainy day to come by the office and speak with me. I appreciate that.
Yeah, no, I'm excited. I didn't expect today to be a crazy day, but it kind of got crazy, so I'm happy I'm here.
Well, I heard in it, but it sounds like it's a good crazy.
Yeah, and that's what we're looking for. I don't mind action as long as it's, positive.
So you grew up just around this area, didn't you? And kind of is it New Tampa or what's that part of town called?
Town and country.
Town and country area. And you went to school, St. Lawrence, and then you went to Jesuit, and that's kind of where you started to get more serious about baseball. Is that accurate?
Yeah, Jesuit is probably when I realized that I had a chance. From a young age, I had always performed well, but there's no way to gauge what, that success is going to, turn into. I remember my dad one time we were playing or we were in the cage and he's putting up balls for me, and it's one of those things that in retrospect you look back and I can see the wheels turning in his head. At the time I didn't understand the gravity of the situation and everything, but he was putting the ball on the tee, and he had spent thousands of hours doing this for me, and he stopped and he goes, what is this going to turn into? And I was like, what do you mean? And he goes, where do you expect to go with baseball? He's like, where do you want to reach? And, I just kind of...
How old were you at this time?
8, 9. Yeah. And I think he was just more, he was trying to gauge my goals. Like what I was, I don't think it was like it wasn't, for him, it was more like, what are we doing this for? And he wasn't saying that. He knew I couldn't even comprehend the depth of the question. He just, everything to me was just kind of superficial at the time. I was like, I guess college. And he was like, okay. And he kept putting the ball on the tee. And he was probably just curious, like, was this something that I was into? Was this something I wanted to keep doing? How good did I think I was?
Right.
Because I think he was confused because I was doing so well as a 9-year-old. He was like, this kid's really good, but is it just because he's good in against the other little leaguers, or is he good on the on the aggregate? Is he?
Well, I'm trying to think of what age you were when I first met you, but Dina and I were in law school, and I remember your mom brought you and your sister Alexa out, and we went to the beach. We went out to St. Pete Beach, and we were at Hurricanes or whatever that restaurant is out there, and you run around the water. I have to think you were about 4 or 5. How old were you in like 1999, 2000?
Yeah. 5,
okay.
5, 6.
So this would have been right before then. So I kind of got to witness all of this from the jump. And you were not only doing baseball, but you were doing, I know you were playing football, and I think you might have been playing basketball too.
Yeah.
I mean, you were a 3-sport guy, but after a while, I think the baseball seemed to kind of take the lead as far as where your talent, your interests were.
Yeah. No, I remember that day. We're crazy enough.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you mentioned because, my son Bo is 2 and my daughter Stella is now 6. And my son has shown a extraordinary interest in musical instruments. And you knowing me and my love of music, it just, my cup runneth over if he's going to become a musician. And so I mean, he's only 2, so we're talking even much earlier than your dad had that conversation with you. But as a parent, I'm like, is this something or is this just a phase? And then should I be pushing it or should I just let it be fun? Because, getting to see, like, when you played baseball, it was so much different from when I was a kid. I remember when I was a kid, we would have a Thursday night game and a Saturday morning game and maybe 2 practices. And that was it. And the season was like 6 weeks long or 8 weeks long.
Really?
And God, you guys just every week of the year, travel ball, this championship, that thing, and I was like, man alive, what a commitment, not just for you, but for your parents and your whole family.
Oh, tremendous. Yeah, I can't believe what they put themselves through for me. It's like I'm forever grateful for that. You know, it's unfortunate because so many other kids were probably at a disadvantage that didn't have people willing to help them and pay for them to go all over the country and or just even all over the state and spend their weekends in places. We were constantly in hotels and playing teams, and it cost money. And to me, I didn't know that at the time. I was just like, oh yeah, you know, we got a tournament here, I'm going to go. But yeah, tremendous effort on their part to put me through that. So I couldn't have accomplished what I did without, you know, them.
Now, were you always a pitcher from early on, or did that come later?
I was, but I was also a very good hitter.
Okay.
I when I was 12 or 13, and there was a couple big defining sort of injuries that I had over my life, unfortunately. But I remember when I was 12 or 13, I had a big shoulder thing that really slowed me down. I probably had to take 6 months off. And up till that point, I was a very good hitter. I was always one of the best hitters in the area. I was well known for that. I actually originally got recruited to be a hitter at a few D3 colleges, even when I was a freshman in high school. So I went to a showcase at University of Tampa, and I was 14 hitting the ball out of UT. And, you know, it's a college field, it's bigger kids, and I was
For sure.
yeah. And then right around that time though, I had I can't remember the exact dates of the injury. It's not perfectly lining up time wise, but I came back from it, and I was like, I can't put in all of this time to become a great hitter again and a great pitcher. And especially because Jesuit had such a good team year in and year out. At the time I was there, all 4 years, at one point during those 4 years, we were the #1 high school team in the country, which is crazy when you think about how many hundreds of high schools there are.
For sure.
Yeah. So for us to be the #1 team across all divisions, across every state in the country, at some point during the year, you know, it's because we had tremendous talent. And so you weren't just, it wasn't another high school where you could just play a couple positions.
I mean, a couple guys that you went to school with there now are like big names in Major League Baseball.
Yeah.
Lance McCullers and
So
who's the kid that played?
Pete Alonso.
Pete Alonso, yeah. And,
So-
I mean, I don't know anything about baseball, and I know those two.
Yeah, Lance pitched Game 7 of the World Series in 2017, I believe, or 18. I wish I could remember the year. You know, that has obviously been another big story.
They've taken that team, the Houston Astros, have kind of had taken a right turn since that. But
Yeah, I know. That is a weird.
is that alleged to have happened while he was there?
Yes, he's been there through that period.
Through that
Now,
period of time.
he's a pitcher. I love Lance.
Yeah.
You know, he wasn't getting any help himself.
Yes.
You know, he had to do what he had to do.
Right. It was the hitters who were getting.
But it
some
was
help.
the hitters that
Yeah.
were getting some help, and me as a pitcher, I take some serious offense
Great
to that.
umbrage, yeah.
Yeah. What was cool, and I actually just saw an article, was a guy I didn't play with, but who I trained with every offseason in Nashville, Tony Kemp, big Vandy guy. He had a phenomenal career. He's in the big leagues now. He was with the Astros at that time, and a Sports Illustrated article just came out saying that he denied being helped. So when he was up to bat, they wouldn't bang the trash cans for him. So he told him I wasn't interested in that, which, knowing him, he is well respected in the Vanderbilt community for being a great guy. Everyone loves him.
Sure.
He's like a fan favorite. So I was pumped to see that.
Right.
You know, I don't know the ins and outs of it. I hope it's true.
Well, it's interesting if you can turn the help on and off. You know, that's kind
Yeah.
of like you
Yeah.
can modulate it a little bit. Let's turn the drums up just a little bit. I'm having trouble.
Well, it's fun. It's like stealing signs in and of itself in baseball isn't.
It's a gray area almost.
It is a gray area. There's no real problem with stealing signs. It's how you steal the signs.
Sure.
If you steal the signs by being a more in tune player,
That's
there's
fine,
nothing wrong with
but
that.
if you're getting like third-party help other than your
Yeah,
coaches
if you're
or
using
whatever.
cameras, exactly. Like if I'm sitting in the dugout and I'm watching you and you're turning your glove sideways every time you throw a curveball, I can go, okay. And let's say if you're number 22, I'll say, let's go twos. you know, when you're up to bat, that means a curveball's coming.
Yeah.
You know, or if I start a word with a vowel, that means a fastball's coming. And that way I can mix up what I'm saying, but I have to be watching you and guessing every time based off your movement. So I have to be tuned in, and you have to be making a mistake because that's you doing a poor job of protecting your pitches.
Giving a tell, just like
Exactly.
playing poker or whatever.
Exactly. So yeah, if you're giving a tell when you're playing poker, it's like there's nothing wrong with using that.
I can read your tells, exactly.
But if I have a camera under the table, or if there's a
There's
serious
a
problem.
Then you get thrown out of the casino.
Yeah.
And maybe your knee's broken in the parking lot. But so anyway, so at Jesuit, you said once you were there, pitching was pretty much singularly what you were focused on.
Yes.
Now, again, you're going to have to help me out because I don't know nearly as much about baseball as probably the rest of your family. I know, isn't in the American League versus the National League, pitchers hit in one league and don't hit in the other league?
Yeah, they hit in the National League. But
so how is it in high school ball? Do the pitchers hit or not hit?
No, you don't end up, pitchers don't end up hitting until AA in the minors. So even in the lower levels of the minors, they don't actually have the pitchers hit.
So then you weren't really hitting in high school at all?
No, never hit in high school. So high school was interesting because kind of what we were talking about of when I knew that I was really gonna be able to pursue baseball long term was between my freshman and sophomore years. I came in as a very good high schooler, and I had a really good group of friends who we were all being highly recruited. And excuse me.
No, you're good.
So me and a couple guys that were
if you get a job offer, I can pause it.
And
if JP Morgan's on the phone, we'll go ahead and hold off on this podcast.
So I should have just gotten rid of that. But I came in and we were good, but I was like, I knew that we were good for high schools. I was like, I don't know really how good we are yet. And, I had Pete Alonso hitting home. Pete Alonso, by the way, for those of you who don't know, is with the New York Mets. He just
Did he get named an all-star or something?
Yeah, he was an all-star, and he just set the rookie home run record last year, and he led the entire major leagues in home runs.
God.
And he won the home run derby.
That's crazy.
Yeah, Pete is a New York superstar right now. He's on, I see him post pictures all the time. He's on, sitting front row at SNL. I think Jimmy Fallon had him on, and Jimmy Kimmel, stuff like that. So
crazy.
Yeah, and I mean, it's like me and him hitting, and we were kind of, and my buddy Spencer Trainer.
Yeah.
And a whole. I don't even want to name
Spencer
all
Trainer,
the guys.
for listeners, is Ty Trainer's son. So some of my colleagues who are listening to this will know and quote unquote love his father. Sorry, Ty. But anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
No, but it was that summer between my freshman year and sophomore year where I just changed, and I don't know what happened.
When did you become as big as you are? So, for those of you who don't know John, I'm just under 6'4". John says he's 6'5", but I swear he's at least 6'6". He's a big kid, but I don't remember, because I didn't get to see you around your schoolmates when you were at Jesuit too often.
Yeah.
And I felt like, you were tall, but you were kind of in the pocket of most of the kids you went to school with. But at some point, it was like, Jesus.
I don't remember the date I took off. I was always taller than my friends, so I think I had a consistent edge over everyone.
'Cause that's definitely something of value as a pitcher.
100%. Longer levers, it's physics. The longer your levers are, the less force you have to apply for the same amount of velocity. So
you look at Randy Johnson and
they have a natural
Roger Clement.
Yeah.
I mean, all these guys are 6'3", 6'4", 6'5".
Exactly. Yeah. It helps with working down the mound, getting closer to the plate, having a better angle down on your fastball, things like that. Which we can get super technical with.
I'd like to a little bit because I've through following you and listening to your father and listening to your family and other things, I had a checkers level understanding of baseball and even more specifically pitching and just things as far as pitch count and how long you're keeping someone up there. And I mean, there's so many levels to it that even moderate observers of baseball probably don't even get. I mean, there's so much to it that you just don't even get. It's really a chess game, So I appreciate it from an intellectual standpoint, kind of how much is going on there at one time, and how tired you are, what you're throwing, what the batters, what the probabilities are, what the having to hide your signs, having to worry about the guy on first base, having to, there's just. It's a vector of so many considerations at one time. It's
100%.
really, it's like flying a jet almost.
Yeah, it got more and more complicated as I got older, and that was something that worked against me too. Was that
You'd overthink it.
yeah, I'm an analytical personality. I love to really dig into the minutia of things, especially in school. I was always doing that, and when you're working in on these case studies in school and you're trying to dig out the root problem and stuff, and same thing with math. And it's like I'm in
Well, it's funny
school my
because
mindset was perfect, but in baseball you don't want to get to that level. Sometimes it helps to have a really good coach who understands those things,
and
who can
kind of just
filter
lets
that
you,
information and give you what you need to execute this next pitch really well, instead of worrying about, okay, I'm tipping my pitches here, but if I stand like this, then I don't feel right. I'm not moving well down the mound. I'm not producing the right amount of force. My spin on my fastball isn't good. The way I'm releasing isn't good. There's and for those of you listening, that don't know this, which I'm assuming a good amount don't, not every 90-mile-an-hour fastball is the same, and that was a big thing you learned as you got older, or more in depth on the sport. Is physics really started getting implemented into the game of baseball while I was playing. There was a massive changing of the arms and or changing of the guard as I was involved in the collegiate and pro levels.
I remember at some point you went to that. I don't know if it was a camp or what it was, where they were like putting the dots on you like they do in CGI, and they were measuring your body mechanics. I mean, they knew within a fraction of a inch what your hip was doing, what your knee was doing, what your toes were doing, and I mean, it's just,
exactly. And it was, and that's how competitive it's gotten. One, but two, we got to this point in baseball where it was the only multi-billion-dollar industry that was run by people who didn't know the underlying science behind or math behind what they were doing. It's like you would never run a company the way that baseball's being run. It was being run by a bunch of people who their dads did it and their dads did it and their dads, and this is how we told our kids, and this is what we were told when we were growing up. And that's there's no development that way. It was just passing along like stories. It was crazy. There was no pushing forward into the new frontier. And if you look at the average fastball velocity over the past 10 or 15 years, it has skyrocketed, and
specific training. And I mean, you see that in, a lot of different sports, like, you've been a fan of MMA, as have I, and we've talked about it before. And you remember the UFC in the beginning, there was like, this guy's a wrestler, and this guy's a boxer, or this guy's a whatever. Now you've got to be amazing at all of those to even rank somewhere. And not only that, the training, you got these guys training in thin air up in, trying to, wearing these oxygen masks and doing motion specific. I remember your training, I was asking what kind of lifting you were doing, and it was very specific to the type of movement you were doing. And back in the 70s, they were probably all just doing squats and bench presses and running around the field, and that was it.
I actually had a guy, and he was one of the head guys of the entire Cardinals organization. And he was an older guy. I won't say his name, but I remember he came in one day to the locker room, and we were telling him about all the lifts that we were doing, and he scoffed at us, and he was like, we didn't work out back in the day. He's like, you don't need that stuff. You don't need that stuff. And that is the most ludicrous thing I've ever heard.
But that was the prevailing wisdom in baseball, as you're saying.
It was.
For so long.
That was. And and he was pushing that on us, and it was crazy. I was like, man, here we are with such a prestigious, historic organization that's had so much success, and you have someone with this much power telling us that something so fundamental to the success of the organization isn't important. I was like, it's so important. I was like, it is the main driver for why you can hit the ball far and run fast and throw hard.
Yeah.
And it is imperative to your health. For how hard you are throwing, for the amount of like force that is being imparted on the baseball, there's so much research now that shows that the
longevity of your arm and your shoulder and your joints.
Everyone, Tommy John surgery is your ulnar collateral ligament, your UCL. Sorry, I couldn't get that out. And the way that they measure stress, and I wish I remember this better, is I don't remember the name for it.
Torque or pounds per square inch.
Newtons, but then there's like the.
That's all right. You don't need to get that high.
I know. I wish I could, but it was the amount of force that you put on that ligament when you throw is twice what that human ligament can possibly take. So what they've proven is that the muscles around that area are taking the brunt of that force. If not, you would tear your UCL on every single throw.
Yeah.
So strength is enormously important in the health of your elbow, and it's also enormously important in the health of your shoulder. Everything works down. And here they are pushing like, don't do this stuff. And it's like you saw these massive injuries because everyone was, there was this wave of Tommy Johns. Everyone started throwing harder, but there wasn't the proper care being taken in place to make sure that those guys didn't get hurt. So that was very interesting. So yeah, just to go along with what you were saying about training, it's imperative, and it was also a serious precursor to the takeoff that the sport saw in terms of performance.
Right. Well, another thing that's interesting is to know the Kilichowskis, at least pre whenever you went to college, is to know that they were a Florida Gator family, or at least
Yeah.
your dad and you were. You had your room painted like the swamp, and so prior to you starting to get looks from colleges, the prevailing wisdom was that you were going to go to University of Florida. But at some point, you started getting looked at by a bunch of schools. What were some of the schools that you were talking to?
So the cool thing was, and just to backtrack for a second, remember at Jesuit my freshman year, I knew I was a good high schooler, but I didn't know what my ceiling really was. That summer, I went out and played a lot of tournaments, and I ended up going to the National Underclassmen Showcase. It's put on by a big organization that is really popular among summer ball. Like anyone that's really in that circuit knows that the National Junior Showcase, I can't remember the exact name, but the kids would recognize it. And I went there and did phenomenally well against their top recruits. And Rawlings ranked me the number one person at that showcase. And really, everyone from around the country went there. And after that, I was ranked a top 10 player according to Perfect Game in the country. And once that happened, I sort of got to pick my poison. I pointed my finger, and they said yes. And that was really, really cool. So I started calling up schools that I thought I'd be interested in. And so not everyone, like everyone sent you mail, but not everyone was like calling you like, hey, I got an offer. It's like if you told them like, hey, I'm interested in you, they would give you an offer. Now I had so many people reach out, but the main schools that I looked at were the University of Florida, University of North Carolina, Vanderbilt, and Stanford.
And North Carolina, I remember, is where Spencer went, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and then I remember Stanford, and we were all saying, well, we can go to California. That's we were all basing where we wanted you to go on where would be the best weekend visit for
Yeah.
us. So always your best interest in heart for us. But now was Vanderbilt in the top 10 prior to you going there, or is that something that kind of happened while you were there?
They had breached it and had some success before I committed. I actually mentioned it. So my high school coach, Richie Warren, who was awesome and instrumental
You've
in
had
me.
some awesome coaches,
Oh,
by the way.
I've been
Well,
super
we were
lucky.
talking about coaches vetting certain things for you. I was thinking about him, and then of course Corbin
Yeah.
at Vanderbilt.
And I remember I was pro or diehard Florida, and then I became very serious about UNC because my friends who were going there, Adrian Chacon and Spencer Trainer, were they would bring me up on their visits, and I loved it. And UNC was courting me, and they had a great place. And Richie goes, are there any schools that you might be interested outside of these two? And I was like, Vandy. And I just kind of threw it out there because I knew off the top of my head that Vandy was a good school and that they had some recent success, but they were not the powerhouse they are today. At the time, they had been to Omaha once. They had been number one in the country once before, twice before. They had been to several playoffs in a row, but no major success, no national championships. Not a ton of coverage. UNC at the time had gone to Omaha 6 straight seasons.
Oh my God.
And that's
Crazy.
so incredibly hard
Sure.
to do. Yeah, that's phenomenally difficult to do. Sometimes you have bad luck. You lose 2 games in a row. A couple guys have some bad days, and
makes
that's
a
it.
difference, yeah.
Yeah. So one of Vanderbilt's best teams ever, 2013, they didn't go to Omaha, and they were clearly the best team in the country. Like by far. There's 4 or 5 guys on the team that are in the big leagues right now that are absolute superstars. They were clearly the best team in the country, and they just, they lost 2 games in a row. It happens.
Yeah.
So, but no, Vanderbilt wasn't there yet.
But obviously, spoiler alert, John selected Vanderbilt, went there, and then you did 3 years of college there before going into the pros, correct?
Yes.
And 2 of those years, they went to the College World Series.
Yes.
And you pitched in both of those World Series. Mm-hmm. And did you pitch in the game that clinched their first World Series
No.
win? You were pitching one of them because I remember biting my nails down to the nubs with Dina in the bedroom while my newborn daughter was trying to sleep in the crib not inches away. And I remember when you guys won, Dina and I had like this silent mosh pit in front of our bed where we were like throwing each other around the room but not making a sound because our Stella was asleep there. But anyway,
No, that was game one, and that one was just unbelievable. I actually had a terrible case of bicep tendonitis leading up to that game. I got it in I want to say early May, late April, to the point where I woke up one morning after pitching and I went to roll out of bed and I let out this terrible yell. I couldn't pick my arm up. And I was for sure that my labrum was torn. I was like, this is the most excruciating pain I've ever had. I was like, everything has to be torn in here. I couldn't, I had to grab my left wrist with my right hand and pick it up and move it places just to walk around the room. I couldn't swing my arm in a walking motion. They ended up giving me Toradol and getting me on a prescription of it, and I stayed on that, but I couldn't throw for 4 weeks. So I was just traveling with the team and I couldn't do anything. So I took a long time off, and then they gave me a couple weeks to practice. I didn't pitch at all throughout the playoffs. I didn't pitch at first when we got to Omaha because you play a couple games to get to the national championship. So then in the national championship series, we're playing Virginia, and Virginia was maybe the best hitting team I ever saw in college. They were unbelievable, and they were red hot against us. Like this team just could not miss. And we started Walker Buehler. And for those of you who don't know Walker Buehler, he is probably the best pitcher on the Dodgers right now. He's a top 10 candidate for the Cy Young this year. He is an absolute superstar. One of the best people I've ever seen play in person. And Virginia just crushed him. Virginia absolutely just crushed him. And I was like, wow, these guys are unbelievable. So then we sent out my other friend, Jared Miller, who was a junior, and he was a lefty. He was a big lefty, bigger than me. He was a huge guy, 6'6" something, 270, something like that, 260, but just a big dude. And he got crushed. And I remember them calling down to me. We went up 9-0 in the first inning. And, you think in your back of your mind, like, we got this game in the bag. And they just started beating us down, 9-1, 9-2, 9-4, 9-6. And you're like, what's happening to our lead? So they brought me in 9-7. And I came in and shut him down for 3 innings. I think I may have given up 1 run in the 3rd inning I was out. I actually threw out my back in the middle of the outing, and my back started to freeze up.
yeah.
But the adrenaline kept me going. But I remember just feeling on fire the whole time.
Well, so God, just there's so many little signs that are popping up as you're going through this. So many things I want to comment on. So you mentioned earlier that one of your hardships in pitching is your analytical side, and it's funny because probably why I love you most is probably what was your biggest obstacle in baseball, which is your intellect. John not only is a talented athlete, but he could have gone to Vanderbilt on grades and scholarship. He's a highly, highly intelligent person, which is great. But the thing that I appreciate most about him is his sense of humor, because he and I, at any family gatherings, could be found in the corner snickering at everybody else, making little side jokes that no one else would understand. A lot of people in the family think he's actually my son, but I promise I didn't touch your mother. Sorry, Bill. But in any event, so, watching you up there on the mound on national TV in the College World Series with the score as you're talking about, I can empathize with you so much because I could just imagine how much your mind is getting in the way of what your body can do. And so the fact that you did what you did was so impressive. And I mean, it helps that you're as tall as you are, that you're a lefty, that your delivery is, would you say untraditional or non-traditional, or at least at that time?
It was a little, because I was so lanky, I had a lot of moving parts.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was distinct.
It's a different look from a lot of the pictures that they were looking at. But anyway, so how did that game end?
So I ended up coming out in the 8th inning after shutting them down. I was, really the only person to be able to stop them and just kind of crushing us coming back. The last inning I was out there, my back was really giving out and it was freezing up, and I could tell.
I knew anything about your back, so this is the first time I'm hearing that.
I remember sitting in there, they're asking if I was okay, and I was lying and shaking my head yes, and I was getting nervous because I could feel it freezing up, but the velocity started to drop in there. I was, I wasn't able to command my pitch as much, but I wanted it, and I felt good. I was the only person who had been out on the mound that could beat them, and I was like, I'm not going to let this stop me.
This out, yeah.
I'm not going to miss this opportunity. So I went back out there. I ended up giving up a run, but they hit a line drive at me, and I kicked it right at our shortstop. and our shortstop barehanded it, threw it across the infield, and barely got the out, and everyone went nuts. And then we ended up winning that game 9-8. So that was like the most intense,
I can only imagine.
yeah, game I've ever been a part of. But it's funny, we talk about the analytical side of it. I was so unbelievably locked in that I don't even remember the fans being around. I remember warming up and being incredibly nervous because I hadn't pitched in 6 weeks. I didn't even pitch in the playoffs. You know, I didn't have a
coming in
feel.
cold, rain
This was
rust.
yeah, this is like my first outing in a while. You're rusty. So I was like, my first, you know, my warm up here is going to be against the best hitting team in the country in the biggest stage for the first national championship in the history of Vanderbilt University. They had never won a national championship.
That's so crazy.
So
and you had Jim Corbin was your coach there. Tim, right?
Tim.
Sorry, Tim Corbin, who was your coach there, and not only an amazing coach, but just kind of a character. I'm trying to remember now the little phrases that you guys used to.
Yeah.
What were some of the phrases that?
I can't even.
Well, if you remember them, they're
Yeah.
pretty funny. But now, did you do? You also did Team USA and played in. Was it?
Yes.
Tokyo or Korea or
Seoul, South Korea.
Seoul, South Korea. Now that was before Vanderbilt, right?
That was in
crazy
between
too.
high
I
school
remember
and
that. Yeah.
yeah.
So Team USA wasn't an Olympic year, but it's effectively the same team that would. Is that true?
Yes, because it was the 18 team. It was they only have world championships every other year.
Okay.
And then they have a qualifier the in between years over here between the Americas. And then if your team qualifies, then you get to play. I just happened to be lucky enough to be 18 at the time that it was the world championships. So the kids before me qualified in the year before, and then I got to go in 2012 and play against all of the best teams from around the world that qualified for that championship, which is kind of ironic because the teams that go aren't necessarily the same players that qualified.
Sure.
I'm sure from the other countries they probably are mostly the same kids, but in the United States we have such a pipeline of kids that every year the USA baseball program has a very serious vetting tryout process. And they have an unbelievable facility in Cary, North Carolina, where they brought in all of these 100 hand-selected kids, put them on teams. You play a tournament for 2 weeks, and they have scouts just all over the place. The place is just laden with people that used to play professional baseball, that are coaches at big-time schools, and so they're constantly watching us. And they just dwindled it down over the course of a few weeks, and then 6 weeks later, they sent us out to L.A. Did the final cuts out in L.A. I made that team, and then from L.A. we flew to Taiwan, played in Taiwan a series against Chinese Taipei for a few games, and then we went over to Korea for the World Championships for about 10 days.
That's so crazy. How was Korea?
Korea was interesting. I preferred Korea to Taiwan. We got treated relatively poorly, not by just everyone. Everyone's doing their own thing. It's a big city, but.
Right.
But there was a clear preference to the other teams there.
Sure.
Especially the Asian teams. I remember one night we got back to the hotel, and this might have happened more than once, that our hot dinner was given to another team, and they gave us only fake crab for dinner. And I think they did that 2 nights in a row until our coaches were like, we're going to eat like a real meal here. So it was a nice hotel.
Yeah.
And the people there just, like, they didn't want us to feel good. They didn't want us to be, feel prepared to play against their teams. And then the umpires were wildly
unfair, inequitable.
Oh, it was crazy. We had a call one time. It was a play at home, and we slid into home, obviously safe. So obviously safe that the umpire didn't have to make an arm movement. Everyone in the stadium just took it for us. Everyone's like, okay, yeah, he's safe. He scored. Great. We started cheering. Umpire calls him out, and it was so blatantly obvious that the umpire on third, who was from Spain, so they try to bring people from all over the world, came running home and overruled him, which you never see.
Yeah.
I've never seen that, and I didn't see it again since then. So that was some of the variables that we were dealing with over there. But overall, it was a very interesting experience.
Right. So then you again, my lacking knowledge of baseball, but you were drafted after your sophomore year, but decided to stay an additional year at Vanderbilt?
Yes.
And you were drafted by the Cubs, correct?
Yes.
And that was after Madden had gone up there.
Yeah, I guess so, yeah.
And like a year or two before they won the World Series.
Yeah.
Now, why was it that you decided to stay at that point?
So the interesting thing was I would have gotten drafted higher my sophomore year than my junior year.
Because you had an injury that kind of impacted that the second time around.
My
Right?
yeah, my junior year got severely impacted by an injury, and I had a very good sophomore year. So I could have done better for myself in terms of the draft, and I'm very happy that I didn't leave. I loved Vandy, and I wanted to stay, and I don't regret it one bit. But I would have gone probably in the top, several rounds, top 5, 6 rounds. I don't know exactly. I really didn't even look into
Sure.
it. I knew where I was in relation to the top prospects. They put out a list, the MLB does, and I saw where I was. So I had a general idea, but I wasn't interested. So the reason I got drafted by the Cubs was it was a 39th round pick, and there's something to do with how the draft works, and they get rights to this or that, maybe they just honestly sometimes their system is fooling in the 39th round. It only goes 40 rounds.
Sure.
They're like, we don't
Whatever.
have anything.
Yeah.
One of the guys there was a Vandy guy, and he called me and he goes, I know you're not interested. He goes, I'm just doing this out of whatever. So it was nice that he did it.
Right.
It was more of a showy thing to me. I don't think they had room in their system for any more people. They were full at that point. But I could have gone that year, but I probably would have gone to a different team. So my interest was that, one, I loved my friends. I loved Vandy. I had gone to 2 straight national championships, having a great time. And 2, graduating was going to be infinitely more difficult. It was hard for me to come back and graduate playing pro ball with only 1 year left.
Right.
With 2 years left, you're not graduating.
Sure.
Because it's 4 semester years where you come back, take a semester, go play, come back, take a semester, go play, come back, take a semester. Doing that 4 times in a row is almost impossible.
Yeah.
Because some summer league or fall league is going to call you. There's leagues, there's winter leagues that they'll come ask you to play. They'll come ask you to go to instructs. The team still has control over you in the off season. So it was probably going to take 5 or 6 years to graduate, and I didn't want to graduate when I was 30. At that point, you're probably just going to go do something that doesn't require you graduating. And I was, dead set. I put in all that time, like I was going to graduate from Vanderbilt, so that wasn't going to stop me. And I took my education very seriously. So because of those reasons, and I believed in myself to go back and have a good junior year and to do even better for myself. The injury was something I couldn't predict.
Right.
But had I gone back and played just as well or better, which I believed I was going to do, I would have gotten drafted even higher and gotten the extra education. It would have been a win-win.
Sure. So, but you did end up going to the Cardinals after your
Yes.
junior year. Now, when you went to the Cardinals, I know that there's the farm system and it's broken up into, I always thought it was AAA, AA, and single A, but evidently it's far more nuanced than that. So where did you go right out of college?
So just as a quick, there's rookie ball, which in Florida is the GCL, and then it goes from there to advanced rookie ball, and then it goes to short season, low A, high A, double A, triple A. I started in short season, so I got to skip the 2 rookie ball leagues, which is out of respect for where I played at college. They were like, this is where you belong. So that was nice. I played there, and then I went up to low A, and then I finished in high A. And that was over the course of 3 years.
Now, that was an interesting experience off the field, too, because aren't you living either in dorms or with families, or, what's life like there? I mean, you have your signing bonus, which I won't talk about the amount, but you got that, which you got something to do, but you're getting paid a pretty de minimis amount to play farm ball, right?
Yeah, I think my first contract was $1,100 a month.
Yeah.
And at the end, I think it maybe got up to $1,500 a month.
Wow.
So
crazy.
yeah, and you only get that for 5 months out of the year.
So you're
not-
amortizing that over 12 months.
Yeah.
It's,
Yeah.
You can barely afford a gym membership. So.
Yeah. So every level up until through low A, they will find housing for you with host families. I had a couple great host families, so that was nice. They took care of me, and that way you don't have to pay rent. You just try to be a respectful, occupant,
Right.
in their home. You just try to take care of their place and do whatever they ask, and out of respect for what they're doing for you. As in high A, you start paying rent. Unfortunately, high A for me was in Palm Beach.
Which is
Yeah.
high end, yeah.
Yeah, so my rent was more expensive than my,
Income, yeah.
Yeah, my income. So what we started doing was we found a place that was right by the field, and I had a great group of friends while I was playing, and we put 7 guys into a 3-bedroom.
Wow.
We had a guy who was renting out a what are they called with the couch seats with the
Like a Murphy bed or a
no, like
trundle bed, a pull out?
not even a bed. I'm thinking of like a sofa or a couch
Okay.
with just a stool.
Like an ottoman.
Yeah, an ottoman.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we could rent an ottoman for like $300 a month because they don't, and that's not even that's not sleeping on the couch. That's it's sleeping on like one seat and
Yeah.
and a little extension there. So it was, a guy on an air mattress, guy on a couch, guy on that. I was sleeping in a twin bed next to my buddy, or in a little single or twin, whatever, smaller next to him. We could touch each other. We were so close. We were grown men, and we don't want to be sleeping in singles where you can touch the other guy in this tiny little room. But you make do, and it's also fun going through the ridiculous struggles of minor league ball together.
Oh, I'm a big believer that at some point towards the end of your life, that will be the golden era for you when you're looking back and remember all the good stuff, and all the hardship and bad stuff will fade away.
Yeah.
But so, experiencing this as a member of the family, at some point there started to be consideration over how long you were going to continue down this path. And I can only imagine how difficult it was for you for several reasons. Number one being your identity was so tied to baseball that it was, not that I agree with this, but I could see how you might feel this way, or others might, that was how you identified with yourself. That's what you knew of yourself. That so to even envision a reality that baseball wasn't, a part of, I would imagine is scary. But not only that, but apart aside everything we just went through with what you had to do, is your mom and dad and your sister were with you every step of the way. I mean, your mom and your dad, it was like a full-time job, just driving you everywhere, talking with agents, college trips, supplies, surgeries, talking to you on the phone. I would be there with them when you would call on the phone, and if you were up or you were down. And I can only imagine as a parent, I mean, even now with, Stella had a bad day at school, which is like she dropped her cookie on the floor or something. I want to jump off a cliff because she's so sad about it. So I can only imagine, how that was for you with the baseball. But, you're a little bit past that now. I mean, how long have you been out now? Has it been a year yet? Coming up on.
So when I stopped playing with the Cardinals, I went through that process where I fought to get back with another team, and I spent a couple months training, went out to that place in Seattle, which was awesome, learned a ton, went and played indie ball in St. Paul, Minnesota, which was a very unique experience. But then at the end of that season, I was like, that's it, I'm done. That was August. So we're, 5-6 months,
Yeah.
something like that.
Well, it's funny because, I'm not the athletically inclined person in the family. I don't sit and watch sports. So I was always the dissenting opinion. I was like, I hope he quits. I hope he quits soon. I want him to do this. He's going to be a stand-up comedian. He's going to be on Saturday Night Live. He's going to start his own company. He's going to be an investor. He's going to be all this other stuff. So this sounds like I'm patting myself on the back, and maybe I'm a little bit, but I've always known that your success and your ability to succeed far surpassed what you were going to do on the field. So while I kind of can sympathize with what I saw you and your parents go through, I've never had any fear about what you might accomplish. And so you went back to Vanderbilt,
Mm-hmm.
and you got your degree.
Yes.
And you got your degree in
Economics and corporate strategy.
So now you are talk a little bit about now what you're trying to do with your life, and kind of what that looks like on a day-to-day.
So and this is still
To
pretty,
the extent that you can.
Yeah.
Use your discretion. That's
okay.
fine.
So it's still pretty nebulous because I never want to be that person that you're looking at going, come on, be realistic. And especially if a kid were to tell me I know what it's like to play minor league baseball, I'm like, you can't say that. It's
Yeah.
like, and so I never want to say I know I want to do this for the rest of my life, because it's kind of absurd to say that without having experienced it in some capacity. I know what I'm interested in. There's a couple routes that I'm interested in that I'm exploring right now. But the two routes that I'm exploring the most right now are investment banking and consulting. Uh, Both are known to be tougher in terms of work-life balance, especially investment banking. But both are considered sort of kind of like business accelerators in terms of the experience you get. Investment banking for finance and consulting for strategy and management. If you look at some of the big consulting firms, those people go on to be, executives of all these different companies. And in finance, if you make it through investment banking, you can either work more senior in that capacity, or you become this person who is widely respected amongst all different sorts of finance firms. You gain so much experience because you're working on these large, complex deals and you're working crazy hours. So it's kind of a necessary evil, or it can be considered necessary if you want to do certain things in the future. So I want to keep as many options open as possible as I grow up. I don't want to pigeonhole myself by taking the easy way out and maybe doing a job that I think will be nice and a little more casual on the front end. And then as I get older, say, wow, if I would have just really
Stuck it out a little bit
if I would have
longer.
grinded through this a
Sure.
little bit, just like I grinded through the minors, like I was like, I could have really opened up any door I wanted in the end. So that's what I'm fighting for right now. In terms of preparing for that, the hard part. The good part is I'm learning an unbelievable amount
Well,
of
you've
information.
applied that work ethic that you had in baseball to study. I mean, coming through law school, studying for the bar, studying for exams, I got to experience some hardcore studiers, and I mean, you put them to shame. You schedule. I'm going to have a meal here. I'm going to use the can here, and then back at it. I mean, the fact that I got you here for an hour today, I appreciate, because I know what
Yeah.
value that is in your time. But I mean, you've really put your mind to it.
Yeah, it's I get up, go with my dad to the gym every morning. I get back at probably 9 to 9:30, and then from then on, I sit down and I study until I go to bed at 10 to 12, somewhere in there. I'll put the books away, but it's really all day. And the hard part now is that, especially with investment banking, they don't have opportunities, and I'm looking predominantly in New York, so I'm really making this up
You
on
said
myself.
there's commercial
Very
centers
competitive.
in the country,
Yeah.
in the world. I mean, there's really
Yes,
a limited.
there's a limit, yeah. And now you have investment banking in Tampa. I'm the bigger of the city that you work in, the more opportunities you can kind of branch off to. I'd rather be able to work down than have to work up one day.
Sure.
If I go, oh, I want to go here, and they go, oh, you can't. You don't have the experience. It makes it a lot easier if you're working in the region where all this is happening. Everyone that I've talked to has kind of advised me on focusing there, so I'm trying to do that. But they don't really have avenues for people like me to come in. They don't, and I don't want to say they don't look kindly on it. I've had great conversations with hundreds of people. I have an Excel spreadsheet with the name of almost everyone in Manhattan, their email, their phone number, and notes on our conversation. And I email them incessantly and let them know that I'm interested and that I'm working and this and that. But the way that they hire is very much, you intern as a sophomore, you intern as a junior, you come in, and in the investment bank, you do your 2 years, and then typically 80% of them leave. So even if you have friends that did it, they don't really have connections back because the turnover rate is so crazy high in those investment banks. And they don't really have a way to bring in off-cycle people such as myself without that much experience. I have a little bit of experience working in a small private equity shop in Nashville, which I did right at the end of my baseball tenure for about 4 months, but that's not substantial enough to go into these highly, highly competitive banks.
You're competing worldwide with people.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
It's not just people from the
Yeah.
U.S. or
No,
from
it's-
Florida or
it-
from
it's-
New York even. It's,
You're talking
Tokyo,
heavy
the Arab
MIT,
Emirates,
Harvard,
England,
Penn. Yeah, it's the best schools, the best students. They're highly, highly competitive. And so recently I've brought in my search to consulting because it provides not necessarily a similar experience, but a similar experience in terms of it being an accelerator into the business world, but from a different focus, more strategy, operations focus. Equally as valuable, I think, and a great way to launch your career in a multitude of different directions. And that's what I want to do, is keep my optionality, because I like the idea of my life having some exciting, unknowns towards the end that could be very cool, that I don't, that's not perfectly, I've had baseball mapped out my whole life.
Well, so that's what I wanted to ask you about. I don't want to, glom on to the tough stuff, but you had a path for so many years in your life, and then how old were you when you stopped playing?
25. I was 25.
So at 25, not that the rug was pulled out from underneath you, but you had to recalibrate.
Yeah.
How was that psychologically for you?
pretty devastating.
Yeah.
Because I was so proud of what I had accomplished with baseball, and you're right, I identified with it, and it was very tough to tell people that I wasn't doing that anymore. And because I knew how many people associated me with that, and that's just an easy talking point when someone sees you. They're like, "Hey, how's baseball?" And I don't mind that. I appreciate that. You know, they're being respectful. They're asking about how you're doing. They're taking an interest in what you do. And but it's hard to say, you know, I'm no longer doing that. And then, you know, we can get into why I stopped, which is a, you know, an even more difficult conversation. But uh, you know, that it was very tough to say, okay. And it's funny because I'm one of the few guys I knew in all of baseball that really had a strong plan laid out. I took the GMAT and was applying to business school during my last spring training.
Right.
So I was preparing for alternative routes in my life. But no matter how much you prepare for those things, because I was studying accounting and financial modeling and staying up to date with the markets and learning this and working on case studies and trying to build out this technical experience for these jobs I was interested in. But no matter how much you do that, when baseball is gone and you're like, I will no longer be a professional baseball player, it is devastating because you think back to everything you did, all the hours I put in. I put tens of thousands of hours into that. You know,
But think of the lesson that gives you is you know, the future is not nearly as predicated upon your effort as we like to think that it is.
I
You know,
100% agree. I don't. I hope this doesn't come off the wrong way, but I think if you asked,
fuck anybody if it does. Come see me about it if you have a problem with what he's saying.
I think if you asked my friends, if I gave you, you know, any phone number of anyone that I played with, or I let you go through a phone book of all the guys I play with and ask them without my knowledge of how hard they thought I worked, they would tell you that I worked unbelievably hard. That, you know, that there was more times where people were saying you're overworking yourself than saying you're not putting enough effort. I was obsessed with what I was doing. So you're right. It was bizarre to watch people who I knew didn't put in a quarter of the effort have more success than me. Now, granted, my issues didn't stem from success or my abilities. They stemmed from some crazier happenings and some, you know, unfortunate things that happened in my life that I couldn't have controlled.
Right.
So that from that aspect, it's hard, and that's where baseball might be a little more unique than other places where I do think hard work might have a higher correlation coefficient than baseball does.
Yeah, you can't fake your way through baseball. Yeah, you gotta.
Yeah, but
There's some talent, but a lot of work too.
yeah, but you know, you see so many guys who are in the right place at the right time, or whatever. And I was lucky to be a tall left-handed guy, but there's some people that are just far more fast twitch that don't need the recovery time that you do, or just for whatever reason. I'm thinking of certain people in particular.
Sure.
I'm avoiding saying any names.
For sure. But I'm thinking about, you know, it's funny because as similar as I think we are in a lot of ways, I think the one way that we are distinctly different is I think you put so much pressure on yourself that, you know, my fear from watching you was what would happen when life doesn't go your way or when the desired result doesn't happen. For me, I put forth as little effort as possible. That way, if things shit the bed, I'm like, you know, what else is going to happen? So,
Yeah.
you know, it's funny when we were at the state attorney's office, my wife, you know, Dina, you know how she is. I mean, every page of every book was tabbed, and she highlighted this, and I mean, even when we had our business, she would be working in her office and just files all over her desk, and it was 8 o'clock at night. I wanted to go home. I was hungry. It's like, what are you doing? She's like, I'm researching this rule. I was like, for what? I was like, for this traffic ticket. I was like, for a traffic ticket? This isn't a murder. It's a traffic ticket. And she's like, well, you're good. You can just walk into court. But she thinks it's that I'm good and that I'm comfortable in the court. Really what it is I know that if, God, my clients may be listening to this. It really what it is, you know, the less you invest yourself in it, the less painful it is if it doesn't go your way. And obviously, I think there's a balance to be found between maybe where you're at and I'm at.
It's true, and going like what you were saying about experiencing those no's or those losses, even when you do everything right, because that was the message that
Not
I grew
only
up
that,
with.
but your mom. I mean, if you know his mom, she's like General Patton, man. There is not a there is not a force out there that she cannot either circumvent or topple. She just is a, she is a
Yeah.
one of a kind force of nature, and she takes after her mother Diana, your Nani, who also is that way, and I think pretty much everybody in that family is. But, well, do you think you've kind of gotten over that, the psychological?
Yes, I've gotten, and that was because the way that my career ended was painful enough that it made it easier to separate from it. It was, it wasn't like it was a spur of the moment thing. I wasn't surprised by it. I saw the writing on the wall based off of the injuries I had suffered and the things I was going through and the change in who I was as a pitcher. I was no longer the same quality of player,
Right.
and I understood that. That was something I fought to gain back, but I wasn't as good in my second and third years as I was my first year, as I was at Vanderbilt. I lost a step due to
Injuries and other stuff, yeah.
yeah. So it was that part was not as hard, and this next step has been just another phenomenally hard thing, because right after I got released, I went out and trained in Seattle, got a lot better, really felt like I made a ton of progress, and I did, but I think I was in the right environment for it, and I felt it was probably just unstable.
Right.
I wouldn't have been able to maintain that for 10 years, which
Right.
I needed to have a full career in baseball.
Yeah.
I could be
You
elite.
could get there, but to stay there is
I could be
tougher.
elite, but yeah, I was never going to stay healthy for that long and perform at that level every day. So I came back. I tried out for all 31 other teams or whatever.
Well, Lauren Pincus, who was actually, I think, our first guest on this podcast, he, the attorney friend of mine, but an agent, and I know that, you guys were able to talk with each other a little bit, and so, well, and then the other thing is not only, you're here at home now, you're here with your parents, you're here studying now. Your girlfriend is up in
UVA law.
UVA law. Is she in her third year?
2L.
Okay, so she's kind of having to do her own thing. So, I mean, it's good that you don't have too many distractions, but I imagine that's got to be hard, having kind of a long distance relationship over that period of time.
Yeah, it does. We've become pretty good at it,
Yeah.
just given the situation, especially going into it with baseball. Baseball kind of helped because people that have a relationship in baseball, they know it's going to be a long distance at least half of the year.
Right.
So you don't get into that relationship without saying, I am mentally prepared for a long distance relationship. It's the dynamic has changed, even though I'm not playing baseball anymore. We've done it multiple times, but we knew getting into it that was going to be the case, at least for some period of time.
Right.
Now it's just changed where I'm looking for a job, she's in law school, and then I'll end up where I end up. So I think if you're not expecting it and then all of a sudden you get pulled apart, that's a lot more devastating than if you say, okay, we're willing to get into this knowing that these are the parameters of our relationship.
Right. Another thing that I love about you is your relationship with your sister Alexa. I want so much as a father, my son and my daughter, to have the relationship that the two of you had. Do you think that that's just kind of the way that it worked out? Is it something that you guys had to work at? What do you attribute that to?
That's a really good question. It's almost like I don't know any other way.
Yeah.
We actually fought like hell.
Oh, I remember, but
I don't know if that was us being close but bickering or us not getting along well together. But I always felt very connected to her. Like I always felt a sense of responsibility for her. We also I don't know. It was my parents did a really good job of keeping us all together. It was just everything we did was together. I think from a young age, my parents fostered that idea of I was to look out for her, and I'm not. I guess I don't know if you consider that a good idea. I think it's nice that they had me do that.
I think everybody should look out for each other. So
yeah. I don't know, but I took like a responsibility for things that were happening in life. Probably too seriously as a young kid. I was always worried about.
Very protective of.
Yeah, I was very worried about
her,
boys.
your mom, everybody. Yeah,
I was worried about her. I was worried about her future and how she was doing in school.
She turned out okay. She's at Tufts to become an orthodontist. And
yeah, she's doing much better than I
am. She's going to be all right.
She needs to start looking out for me.
Yeah, paybacks. So anyway, we almost did a full podcast that we didn't record before this one, talking about politics, and politics are a very passionate subject in our family. So I'm not going to put you on the spot as far as familial positions. But have you been following it at all? The election, the debates?
I have been. I was watching last night.
I didn't watch. I was telling you before the show that I think 2016 did some pretty severe psychological scarring to me. So I've really made a concerted effort to not kind of let it occupy so much space in my mind as I had in years past. But I heard the debates last night were a little bit insane.
I thought that they were less insane personally than
The one before.
The one before was nuts. It was like primetime TV. I would have watched it as like a drama TV series.
Well, I'm just amazed at Bloomberg because he's not a dumb guy. If he had more money than God,
He was wildly unprepared
and
for the
some
first
of
one.
the mistakes that he's making is like day one stuff.
Yeah.
Like, be sure not to tell everybody that you bought 20 congressional seats. Have a better answer about non-disclosure agreements. In all your businesses. Like, did you think maybe we should have talked about that before you went on the stage?
Yeah, he seemed, and I think there was a much better way for him to frame his story in that he's getting attacked for being a billionaire. He knew that was coming. That's not a surprise.
Yeah, that's the
they
first
know who
thing
they're
you
running
put-
against. Yeah, that's the first thing that they're going to attack you for is that you're more of the same. And it's the way that you come out against that is I understand that. I know the benefits that I'm given. I'm running for office because I want to give up all those benefits and I want to change these rules for people like me because I don't think we're giving our fair share. People like me who are worth $50 billion, like we don't need this stuff, whatever. And whether or not he believes it, it's like that's a much better role to take. Is that I've seen it firsthand. I know exactly where to change it so that this country is put on a better path where people are paying their fair share as opposed to me paying the effective tax rate of someone making $50,000 a year when I'm worth $50 billion. So I found that I was like, why am I thinking that? I'm 25 years old. I'm unemployed. I'm sitting at home on my couch and I have a better response than you with your full team.
You could make that argument about people who are president. But in any event, Super Tuesday I think is coming up this next Tuesday, isn't it? March 5th?
Sounds right.
Yeah, and that's like a bunch of states have their primaries. And so, I mean, to me, it seems like the writing's on the wall unless there's a big mistake at some point that it's going to be Bernie. And one of the biggest reasons, aside from, I don't play so much credence in polls as I did before the last election because they got it wrong big time. But I've seen just a lot of now negative treatment in the past week about Bernie. They had him in South Florida talking about, how Cuba wasn't all bad and some of this other stuff.
Yeah.
And I think he was at a rally in Russia talking about this, whatever. It's like, here we come with, now they're reaching deep in their pockets for what it is. But I mean, what do you think? Do you think Bernie's got it?
I mean,
Not the election, just the
nomination.
Yeah.
I mean, I think he has the votes. I do think that the Democrats will rally to try and defeat him because they believe that he is too divisive. We saw it with Hillary,
Well, we did, and I'm wondering if it's going to be tougher this time around to do that.
It will be.
Because
I
there's
think
a
it
lot
will
more
be tougher.
scrutiny and transparency.
But I think that he will have a better chance to win the nomination this time. I think he is still the clear front runner. I do think that he will end up being too divisive to win.
Well, this is what worries me is, I'll admit it because I don't care, but I'm pretty far on the left side. But even being, I had a great amount of respect for McCain. I'm cool with Romney. I really liked Kasich. There's some of these other people, and my fear is just the wild swings between extreme positions, not even extreme political views. Like we were talking about, Trump, politically speaking, is not super conservative.
Yeah.
I mean, he's got other issues, but I almost think in a lot of ways that Trump was a response to Obama. Would you agree that kind of an extreme, not correction, of course, but kind of an extreme reset? Every action has an equal and opposite reaction.
And Obama wasn't that far left, and he actually ran on some more left policies, but he lost. I did a pretty interesting research paper on this for both of their healthcare bills and how they controlled they controlled the executive branch.
Wasn't Obamacare written by like Jeb Bush or by Romney
not by them, but by think tanks have a phenomenal amount of
it was a conservative idea in the beginning.
There were some parts of it that had
Sure.
conservative origins, and
Mhm.
that goes back to, oh gosh, it's one of the think tanks back, like a guy that works in one of them back in the early '90s. He
Right.
mentioned it, but I mean, he was running on, gosh, he what did he
Well,
run
his
on?
views on gay marriage, his views on immigration, and all these things were
Yeah,
not remotely as liberal as
no,
the party's become right now.
yeah, no, he wasn't, and that's because he actually ended up. And there's a pretty good book called Listen Liberal. I don't know if you ever read it,
Mm-mm.
but it talks about how the most recent people that were like, Clinton and Obama, that what they ran on, and who they said they ran for, really they ended up finding themselves pretty centrist because they end up aligning with kind of this elite group either out of Silicon Valley or out of New York. And in order to get that money and really get those votes, they have to end up aligning in a little more central capacity than where they initially stood. So part of where his healthcare plan that he ran on was, and I can't remember the piece that for some reason it's escaping my mind, but it didn't get in, and it had the popular support at the time in the polls. It had his support, and he had control, or the Democratic Party had control over the House and the Senate.
Yeah.
And it's just interesting to show that there are alternate forces that are at
Oh, for
play,
sure.
and it's primarily these think tanks, and within those think tanks that are producing this research that's getting put in the Oval Office and getting signed, and they are pushing it. And on the boards of those think tanks are executives at all of the big insurance companies, and I think you'll start to see that same thing where they will start to fight. They'll start to put out research that is anti what Bernie is running on.
Right.
And I'm not saying this like I'm supporting Bernie. I think that his policies are the most admirable, and I think on a moral sense, I align with them. Like I want everyone to have health care. I want everyone to
The
live in a house.
practicality of it might not be.
Yeah, right now, if he had a good answer for how he was going to pay for all these things, I would support. But like you ask him, he doesn't have a number. It's like come up with a number, show the people. Right now, the projected cost of 10 years of his plans for paying for college, for paying for healthcare, is roughly $50 billion. The projected tax revenue is like a fraction of that. And he said we're going to tax Wall Street speculation. First of all, that's unbelievably broad. Second of all, give me a number on what you think that's going to produce. So he's also running on things like a wealth tax, to bring up my girlfriend once again, who I'm sure doesn't want to get mentioned, but she was telling me about a class that she was in, and she's in law school at UVA, and her professor mentioned that that the wealth tax, they believe, is unconstitutional and would never be able to get passed through. So that's something that he's
A
running.
lot of people get that wrong too. Like I know everybody's saying that they're saying if you make $26,000 a year, 52% of your
Well,
income.
that's a lot.
And it's like
That's a blatant lie. I'm
Yeah.
saying but he is running on
Sure.
a wealth tax, and I think, and typically when I listen to a professor, you can make the guess that they are probably more left leaning.
Yeah.
It's just the way it is.
Well, sure.
So I don't think that this person was saying that despite
Right.
Bernie or Warren. I just think it was just that, they're in law school. They're talking about what is legal and not. And like, they were like, I don't think that this is constitutional. It won't work. And also you have to think about, everything has unintended consequences, and what are you incentivizing?
Thank you for saying that. So this is what I wanted to kind of ask you, and I know we're going long at this point, and a lot of this is more self-serving to me. But one of the big things that you hear when people are speaking in favor of Trump is the economy and jobs. And my question, and I truly don't know the answer to this, and you may not either, or maybe you have an opinion, but I fear that taking where things are at the moment as the sole indicator of their value is a problem, because I think it's very easy to put the economy somewhere, but to have a ripple effect that doesn't show its head for 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the road, that could be cataclysmic. I mean, you take the 2008 crisis, there was, people were putting in amazing quarters at their corporation. You could look at it and say, yeah, we're doing great, but there's a second part to that coming down the road. So I just wonder, we can look at jobs now and we can look at the economy now and say it's great. And I don't know. I really, it could just be, it's good. I don't know. Mm. But I wonder at the expense of what are certain things happening now. Have you thought about that at all? Or
So I have, and I wish I had some more concrete numbers. And the hard part is that, just like everyone who is left or who is right, it's when our president is making jobs, he's making only good jobs. And when this president's in making jobs, they're only making bad jobs. Oh, he's probably hurting us in the future. And it's probably somewhere in the middle. Now some people are more than others. The one thing today, and that's one thing where Democrats don't give him enough credit for. It's like they, and I understand where they dislike him on personal issues and on a whole slew of different issues.
Just calm down. Like no
Yeah.
one would pay attention to half the stuff
Yeah,
he does.
exactly.
You know?
But he has had a ton of success with the economy. It's unquestionable. We've created jobs. We're at all-time low unemployment. Unemployment amongst minorities. It's fantastic. We should be happy about that. Having said that, a massive issue that we're facing, an existential issue that we're facing, is global warming. How are we producing those jobs is a very important consideration. A big thing that
Does
we've
it have
done.
longevity? Does it? Yeah.
We've pushed for non-clean energy jobs. Now, I don't know the energy dynamic in this country, and you have to think of geopolitical issues. Where are we going to get our energy from if we're not producing that? Or we're going to be at the whims of the Middle East or whatever. We're fracking,
yeah.
so we have our own oil, which is nice to have that stability. But at the same time, is this unsafe? Will this hurt our country? If we're burning, we're focusing on coal. It's a dying breed, but those people still need jobs. So it's respecting them, but it's I liken it to eating a cheeseburger versus eating a salad. A cheeseburger tastes really good today, but it's bad for me tomorrow and every day on. A salad, I'm not really happy today, but I'm going to feel better tomorrow and every day after that. Investing in green energy is sort of a similar thing. When you put constraints on a company and how they operate, everyone, you hear everyone, they're free trade. That's why, we don't like the tariffs and whatever. And that's a whole other thing we can get into, but you don't like those tariffs because they're an impediment on free trade. And we've economists have come together and said that free trade is where we can find a Pareto optimal, position for our economy. The same thing that goes for corporations. If you allow them to pollute at their own free will, they're going to do the best that they can possibly do. They will profit the most because they can do everything in their own self-interest, and they can maximize their profits in the short term. Eventually, if you start to hurt the world, you start to change the ocean river currents. Colder places become colder, hotter places become hotter. You can't produce certain foods, certain jobs will go by the way. People will start to die more. You'll start to see the breeding of more virulent diseases like we're seeing with coronavirus. You're seeing more hurricanes and tornadoes, and people are dying from this. You're wiping out certain industries by the way that these things are operating. You're changing the
makeup
of the
globe,
world.
yeah.
And in that case, the long term, those people will suffer mightily. I did a massive research paper on climate change economics, and the projections are in the trillions of dollars for world GDP that can be impacted by the globe warming by a couple degrees Celsius. So yes, we can, you can deregulate the EPA and all these things, which we have done in the short term, and create jobs from that because we don't force them, and we can create growth from that, and we can see the economy go up. And what I don't want to do is say that everything Trump has done has been deregulate the EPA to create jobs.
Sure.
I think that is a minor part of the success he had. I think a major part was tax reform. I think he negotiated a good deal with the USMCA. I think that what he's doing with China in the long term could be extremely beneficial for us if it doesn't turn into a recession in the short term, because if he changes that dynamic in the way that we trade with them, it could get us on some enormously favorable, level playing field with them.
Sure.
But that is yet to be seen. Who knows how that turns out? We just initiated stage 1 today of reducing some of the, it's like farming taxes or whatever. I wish I could. I skimmed over the article before I was getting interviewed today, so I had to I was reading all the Wall Street Journal in 2 seconds. So that is where you get into these things where it's everything he's doing isn't all bad. However, the ramifications of some of the deregulation he's done in order to create jobs could be extremely bad if we don't, taper that in. And that's what you hear with these people in the Democratic debates.
Well, I mean, it goes right to the crux of the political argument, the business versus government, or these two things, and both of them in moderation are good, and there should be some oversight and some checks and balances and all that sort of thing. So I think it's the eternal debate. But anyway, wow, we got into some stuff today.
Yeah.
I appreciate you coming down. I know you're probably going to go back and put 6-7 hours in the books tonight and argue with your parents about politics and have some dinner and do whatever else you do. But thank you so much for coming in. It was a pleasure. I always love talking to you, and I I wish you great success in all your future endeavors.
Thank you. This was awesome. I loved it.
Well, come back. Hopefully, you'll come back sometime.
Got it.
All right. Bye bye.